I think it's my responsibility to introduce the next panel. And I'd like to bring up Dr. Prashila Dulab. Dr. Dulab is Health Information Technology Program Area Director for Health Information Technology at NORC. And she's responsible for directing health IT technical assistance, evaluation, and assessment projects for federal agencies and foundations. In this role, Dr. Dulab serves as project director for the evaluation of the State Health Information Exchange Cooperative Agreement Program for the ONC. That was a long title. Dr. Dulab also directs large technical assistance centers, including AHRQ, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, National Resource Center for Health IT, and HRSA's HIT Technical Assistance Center.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to, be here today, and I've been quite fascinated by, where we have come. I was actually here at the first Consumer Health IT Summit and was sort of reflecting that, the whole world has somehow, changed in so many ways. But without further ado, I actually wanted to invite up an esteemed panel. So first of all, I'd like to sort of call on stage Craig Lipset, who's Head of Clinical Innovations at Pfizer. Craig, are you around? Wendy Nelson, who's the Health Scientist Administrator at the National Institutes of Health. Jean Slutsky, who's the Chief Engagement and Dissemination Officer at the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute. Sharon Terry, Chief Executive Officer of the Genetic Alliance. And finally, Keith Masolo, Associate Professor at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So, just to sort of get us started this morning, we've heard, some very interesting accounts about, the role that patients and caregivers can play, particularly in the sort of, learning healthcare system. We are entering an interesting time where there are opportunities to get patients to share information about themselves in many different ways, from Fitbits, medical devices, mobile devices, the opportunity to sort of report out on, their outcomes in ways that we have not had before. And, there are lots of opportunities in sort of the technological advancements that are making things possible. That's not to say that there aren't sort of persistent and ongoing challenges that we have to contend with, but that's what makes, our lives interesting. So really, in this session, what we would like to do is explore sort of different, innovative, interesting, cutting-edge private and public sector efforts to ensure that patients are able to share their data, to advance research around patient-centered outcomes, and also different things that, the presenters here will talk about in terms of how they are moving the agenda forward. So to begin with, I'm going to give each of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and to share with you a little bit about what they do. Over to you, Craig.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Craig Lipset. I lead a team focused on innovation in our clinical trials and development programs at Pfizer down in New York. We're up in New York from here. Some of the areas that we're particularly interested in right now include the diverse data that our research teams are hungry for and how we can ensure a predictable and stable, a diverse and contemporary stream of that data to power the research and development of new medicines. Some of those data sources you were just speaking to, whether it's EMR data, sensor data, genotyping data, interesting combinations of all those three and more. We're certainly very interested in helping to support that ecosystem by not only leveraging those diverse data, but being a partner as a data holder and a data generator. When we run our clinical trials, we generate data on typically over 100,000 patients a year. And one area that we'll speak about this morning is how we're trying to come into that ecosystem by first sharing the data that we collect on our patients with them to improve their own health and wellness so that we can be a trusted and credible partner when we ask those patients to continue to share back with us. Thank you.
Very welcome. Wendy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Nelson, and I'm from the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research at the National Institute of Health. And as you know, many of you know, the National Institute of Health is a very big place. It's the nation's health research agency. We're looking at this area from so many different ways. How do we turn knowledge into data into knowledge? How do we work really bring patient-centered research, not in the PCORI world, but really how do we integrate that? How do we think in our technology about user-centered design so that we're making devices and tools that are usable for who they're designed for instead of just for researchers? And then we're looking at ways to think about sharing data and to crowdsource in ways that would make research it just challenge some of the ways that we've traditionally done research. So we're looking at all sorts of things. We're really interested in the mobile world. We've always been interested in the electronic health records. Mobile's been a bigger area now. I work with a group across NIH in the mobile space, and we're very interested there. And we see many, many opportunities to not only improve health, but also to, as the last panel talked about, to reduce the digital divide. So we see opportunities and for disseminating and implementing best practice.
Thank you. Jean?
Good morning. I'm Jean Slutsky. I'm the Chief Engagement and Dissemination Officer at the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. How many of you know what PCORI is? Oh, good. So I won't give you the infomercial. But one of the things that the legislation that you're probably aware of really tasks PCORI is being patient-centered. So it's been a very interesting past 3.5 years as we've tried to create an environment that supports, reinforces, and enables communities and individuals to not only be participants in research, but drive research, govern research, and become involved in the process from beginning to end. And as many of you know, the research enterprise has often been a bit oblique and opaque. One of the incentives is to make it a much more transparent and inclusionary process.
Hi, I'm Sharon Terry, and I'm mostly here because I'm the mom of 2 kids with a genetic condition. They were diagnosed in 1994, and my husband and I didn't know any better and decided to found a foundation that would be dedicated to research on that condition, founded a registry in 95 and a biobank in 95. Very quickly we realized that what we were doing was not very practical for one condition and really should be used for many conditions. So we began to work with an organization called Genetic Alliance, which I'm now the president and CEO of. It's a network of about 10,000 health organizations. 1,200 of them are disease advocacy organizations. And it's really working on how do we empower individuals, families, and communities to transform health. So all of my work is really coming from what I consider a participant perspective, since I kind of dislike the word patient, since it means we're supposed to sit on a little table in a Johnny and have somebody else tell us what's happening. And so I really work to find innovation and disruption in this space.
So, excuse me, I'm Keith Marzano. I'm an associate professor of biomedical informatics at Cincinnati Children's. I do a number of different things at Cincinnati Children's, including I work with a lot of the quality improvement and research networks that are run out of Cincinnati Children's, including the Improve Care Now network that Dr. Conway mentioned earlier in the day, really focusing on trying to turn their networks into learning health systems for particular conditions. How do they collect the data that's important, the standard of care data, use that to take action, generate chronic care management reports, quality improvement reports, and research data sets. And then also several larger scale networks, including a couple affiliated with PCORI, to generate essentially large analytical data sets from information collected from the medical record, things of that nature.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for sort of a very detailed and sort of in-depth sort of introduction, and I think sort of sets the stage nicely for some specific questions that I wanted to start targeting to each of you. So, Craig, you talked about sort of the diverse data sources and engaging with patients, but just to sort of set the stage. Can you sort of maybe discuss a little bit more about the efforts that Pfizer has underway to encourage patients to participate in research? So what are some of the strategies you're using? What have you seen worked? Where do you see some persistent issues?
I think I'll break that out into a couple of categories. The first is around improving awareness and information for patients to help them to have the tools and the resources to make an informed decision around participation. We see data time and again that even in places like cancer, that 85% of patients are unaware of how to participate in a trial but would consider one. Very often that points back to some of the interactions with their own healthcare providers. So we certainly have a lot of efforts that we're actually doing collaboratively with other pharmaceutical companies and other stakeholders today to try to improve awareness among patients, and then using other emerging technologies like iPads for electronic informed consent to help patients to make that informed decision by supplementing what was a very thick stack of paper on a clipboard with multimedia and other resources. We carry that forward to improving how patients participate to make it a little easier and less of a burden, using different mobile tools and otherwise, perhaps, to participate from home or in more convenient ways. And then carry that throughout that process by finding opportunities for those patients to truly participate in the development program, whether it's insights that we're increasingly looking to capture and collaborate with patients early on to help drive those development programs straight through to how we're sharing information when studies end.
Okay, excellent. So can you share with the audience from your vantage or in terms of sort of the studies you've initiated, how important is it for patients to see the results of sort of the trials they are participating in, and the strategies that Pfizer has been using to make data coming out of these studies more accessible and understandable to patients?
Sure. So I'll break that out into two areas that we're active today. One is around delivering to patients lay language summaries of study results, and the second is around their own individual data. We've seen published reports that over 8 out of 10 patients would want to see the results of the study in which they participate. At Pfizer, we're committed. We publish, we post, but simply publishing and posting large files and PDFs and scientific papers doesn't mean it gets back to the individual patient. We were the first pharma company a few years ago to go through a process of figuring out how to take a lay summary and get it back into the hands of the patient after the trial has ended, often at the time when a CSR, a clinical study report, is produced. That can be quite a while after the patient's last visit, and so there are quite a few challenges to figure out around the mechanics, to figure out around the language that would be considered acceptable and non-promotional as a research sponsor. We've carried that forward today to the work we've been doing with the Blue Button and working to enable those patients who've completed studies the ability to download their own individual electronic clinical data from the study. Our studies capture extremely robust, structured, clean data. We invest a lot of money and effort to make sure that data is correct and clean. So it's a nice resource to explore how we can, as a data holder, leverage the Blue Button infrastructure to get that back into the hands of patients. We have 2 pilots in that area live right now.
Okay, excellent. So sort of, my last question. In terms of sharing clinical trial results with patients, have there been any unintended consequences? And if so, what have you sort of noticed about that?
Well, we haven't seen necessarily any patient-facing unintended consequences right now. But I think one of the unintended consequences that I didn't necessarily anticipate was we've sort of opened a door between the life sciences and pharmaceutical companies and this whole blue button ecosystem that's out there. And folks like Adam Dole are very helpful in holding that door open for us. But there have been a number of other pharmaceutical companies that have joined us on this journey. Quick anecdote, you may know that Pfizer's logo is blue, and if this is any example of how much literacy there was in pharma companies around the blue button, I was credited by some in my company with choosing the color blue for our blue button project, that it correlated so nicely with our logo. I'm colorblind, so clearly they complimented the wrong person. But as we've engaged with others, one example, I have a colleague here from Novartis, Joris van Dam, and together with some colleagues from Lilly, like Thomas Krohn, over the last year, we've built up some additional projects leveraging the blue button. And one great example over the last year is some collaborative work to improve the content for patients when searching for clinical trials. Most of the content that pharmaceutical companies produce is on clinicaltrials.gov, but that's very limited in terms of being accessible for patients. We're very restricted in terms of what content we can put there. But as sponsors, we produce lots of other content that isn't necessarily structured and organized and centrally available. Working together, Pfizer, Lilly, Novartis, we've now organized that content and we're starting to post it online. Just last week, Tom from Lilly announced it's now at developer.lillycoi.com, and I'll tweet that if there's anyone that's interested in learning more. But if you're a developer looking for robust content to help patients match for trials, this can be a new source, and it's only going to grow as there's a backlog of other companies very eager to add content there for developers.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Craig. So, you're bringing up sort of lots of interesting themes around making, information more accessible, more available, the data quality, it's structured and, can be used downstream for research. I actually wanted to sort of ask a few questions of Keith, because I know you're sort of, in the center of, all of this morass. And, from all of the work that you've been doing, what do you see, first of all, as some low-hanging fruit in terms of making electronic clinical data more accessible? So we have lots of EHR adoption, and, certainly there's sort of opportunities to try and leverage that data downstream for other purposes. But, there are all kinds of thorny issues that we need to work through. So, Keith, interested in your sort of perspectives on that.
Sure. And I think a lot of it has to do with, trying to figure out, what do you want to use it for and who is it that's going to use it? And so I think one of the, I don't know if I should use the word challenge, but, one of the challenges of something like Blue Button is, it's going to require the patient's going to come in and download the data and then, pass it off to the coordinating center. And that works very well for a lot of type of research studies, but then for others, you end up having to take an alternative approach where you're sort of working with the center on behalf of all the patients to get everybody's data, because that would allow you to use it for, quality improvement, care management, and other things. And so I think what I personally would like to see is, sort of expanding on, the data that are available and just making it easier. So it's not just Blue Button. You've got, other kind of buttons, if we want to do it that way, that make it easier to just do things on behalf of the patients or just sort of at a broader scale.
And, sort of along those lines, how do you think, patient engagement sort of can be increased, and, what are sort of the barriers? So from that vantage, how can increased patient engagement, if you will, lower the barriers to extracting, or attempting to extract data from electronic health records? So what role do you see the patients having in that context?
So I think it puts some pressure, if you will, on the centers and whoever needs to make decisions to make those decisions. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is really educate patients, and so a lot of the stuff that Pfizer's talking about, just sort of talking about the research that's going on, try to put the findings of the research in lay language. getting patients to actually participate in the design. What are the questions that you want asked and answered, and just ways of presenting that information back to patients so that they can act on it and improve their lives. And I think everybody always says we want to come up with better designs for patients so that they can have they can understand the data and everything else. But the clinicians want the same thing. Every time we've designed a nice flashy sort of patient-facing report, the clinicians always like that better than whatever it was that they had before. So I think everybody benefits. It's not just the patients.
Excellent. So, one of the themes that was also sort of brought up is, as you sort of engage with the patients, making sure sort of they understand how they're being engaged in a research study, the themes around consent, making data understandable in lay terms. Sharon, I wanted to sort of, get your perspectives, from a mom in terms of, your experiences with, sort of getting engaged, if you will, in research, and what have you seen as some of your biggest concerns? Again, from the, participant perspective, your term.
Sure. So my greatest challenge in this area, I think, is the sort of us and them that we see in healthcare and biomedical research that we don't really see in other places. On the drive-in here today, I was listening to electric cars. We want to educate the public about them and how good they are for the environment. And so what one group of people are doing is having a road race, like a Formula One kind of thing. So they don't sit around saying, can we get some brochures together? Can we educate the public? They basically say, how do we engage people so that they're excited by this? And I think that what we need to do together, and I want to say we, because I think also if you're making cars, you think of yourself as a car driver as well as a car maker. And I think in the biomedical research field, it's a highly regulated cottage industry. So we have both high regulation and a lot of cottage industry aspects. So how do we figure out together to do real engagement and not just a transaction, because lots of it is a transaction. If I enter a clinical trial, it's a transaction. If I visit my doctor, it's a transaction. And certainly we have to have some transactions in there, but I think we need engagement. So for me, it's how do we make that a frictionless process that I can engage in research. It's part of my daily living. For me, there's not a divide between research and clinical care. I know we're all worried about the therapeutic misconception and all the other things that the regulatory regime has brought in for us, but I think we need to think about that. I think we need to think about breaking down those silos and thinking cross-condition and not naming ourselves as one thing or another. So the we I'm also talking to is my own community, which has been fabulous at building silos. Brick-and-mortar advocacy organizations are harder to work with than pharmaceutical companies. For competition, for thinking that they're going to die if they don't get the next buck from somebody, if they're fighting for PCORI dollars or NIH dollars, et cetera. So I think we need to see those boundaries. And then I think the other piece for me is innovation in clinical trials, and I really appreciate the kinds of things that Craig is talking about, and we've been working with Thomas and with Novartis as well, to look at crowd-enrolled, crowd-sourced, long-tail efforts to really get the entities that are funding those things to not just talk about them. And I know the innovation units in pharmaceutical companies and even NIH and PCORI are really excited by those. But sometimes when it gets to where the rubber hits the road, it's hard to convince the people who also hold the purse strings that it's let's make $1 billion bet on this rather than a $100,000 or $500,000 bet.
Great, thank you. So, along those lines of, sort of breaking down the barriers and, if you will, not making all sort of these, very distinct demarcations between what is, clinical care versus research, it is all part of a continuum. From your vantage, have you seen sort of, good models around, getting patient consent? What seems to work, and why?
So I'd also love to throw out the word consent, like get rid of it, because I think consent is part of the transaction, and instead we want to be part of engagement. And there is already a rubric for this so that we can be academic about it, and that is the Fair Information Practice Principles. They include consent, but they have a lot of other pieces, like the kinds of notification that Craig's talking about, like the kinds of things that PCORI's been doing. So what I think we need to do are build models that do that kind of engagement, and I am involved in one of those. In fact, it's a PCORI-funded project called Community Engaged Network for All, built on something called the Platform for Engaging Everyone Responsibly. And the platform is a way to engage and interact with health data, with clinical trial information, et cetera, but it is not a single transaction. And the very interesting thing for me was bringing this 600,000 lines of code with 3 guides that lead you through setting granular and dynamic preferences for sharing, privacy, and data access to the Western IRB, because I have to play in this field and I know I need IRB approval. WIRB looked at it, they loved it, they puzzled over it for 3 weeks, and then they said, but where is the consent form? This is gamified, this is dynamic, this is fun, and they wanted a consent form. So we have to, in the enrollment process, have one of those pieces of paper that someone could print. The point being, I think that there are, in the PCORI projects that are part of the PPRN, which are the patient-powered research networks, some of the CDRNs, I think we're starting to see some engagement models. But again, I want to see us go way out on limbs. And the other piece I want to say that we're not doing a good job with, even in PCORI, and I think it's okay to say this, I'm on the executive committee for the PCORnet, is with diversity. That I really appreciate the last few panels. We have not cracked that nut yet. We have not understood yet what does it mean to make this a truly diverse national clinical research network.
Great, thank you. And so that's a nice segue, Jean, into some of the things that I wanted to sort of explore with you. Can you sort of share with the audience, some of the resources that PCORI is sort of making available to help, get researchers, make patients the focus of their work?
Sure. It's actually, I really appreciate the comments that you made. I've been a research funder for over 25 years. I hesitate to say that because that's a long time, and then you can age me, although I did have a clinical life before that. And I do think we're a bit on a revolution now in terms of walking the walk rather than just talking the talk. But even at PCORI, which is one of the most patient-centered or consumer-centric or whatever term we want to use, organization, I even see that it's hard to make sure a glossary of terms is understandable by people who have health literacy issues. So we have to work on this every single day. And because of that, PCORI has actually put a lot of resources and materials and opportunities in place to help not only consumers and patients participate in research, but researchers. This is not natural for researchers to embrace families and communities. There was a movement of community participatory research about 10 years ago, and it really had a lack of funding, but it set down some objectives that I think still hold true today. So at PCORI, we have funding opportunities for communities and researchers to get together. They're called the Pipeline to Proposal Awards, where they're set in 3 tiers. I like to think of the first tier as get to know ya. The second tier is let's get serious. And the third tier is let's make something happen. And they graduate in terms of dollar amount, but really they're trust building and opportunity building program. And then we have something called the Engagement Awards, and these Engagement Awards are intended to be program support awards, so supporting research and practice, supporting dissemination about research practices, engaging communities in dissemination and participation in research. And then we have our research awards, which actually, quite frankly, I can't tell you how many letters of intent or applications I look at, and if they don't have a fully developed engagement opportunity for not only patients and caregivers and consumers and communities, but other decision makers in the healthcare arena, they don't do well. And we provide materials to help researchers build out their engagement plans through a rubric that has been piloted and is now available on the website. And then we do what's called merit review. Traditionally, NIH, AHRQ, and other funding agencies call it peer review. We call it merit review, where at least 4 people review an application. 2 are scientists and 2 are stakeholders. Generally, the 2 stakeholders are at least one patient or family caregiver, and another is another decision maker from the community that's not a researcher. And I just want to comment on the fact that this is not easy. I mean, we're talking about different cultures. You know, it's a cultural perspective, it's semantics, it's where you go home at night and what pays your salary, and these are all challenges, and communication in these environments are really challenging. But one thing I've heard from many of these projects is, you know, the first 3-6 months were really hard. You know, we were you versus them. But then there is a sort of coalescence that happens toward a very similar goal, because it's an opportunity for everyone involved to make this work.
Thank you. And so, you know, just I guess very briefly, I should just pick up on something that Sharon brought up. You know, PCORNet and the patient-powered research networks, you know, that PCORI funded are sort of at the forefront of, you know, innovative models in terms of how you effectively engage patients. You know, are there any sort of illustrative examples that you just want to sort of briefly mention to the audience?
So, you know, I think your example is actually quite interesting. You know, irritable bowel syndrome is just a horrible challenge for, you know, adolescents as they go through their teen years and have to find themselves always back in their clinician's office, or, you know, running to the bathroom all the time, or getting slammed in the hospital. And for clinicians, it's a huge, you know, quality improvement issue as well as a clinical issue. Can you prevent readmissions? Can you keep these kids in school and playing basketball and whatever they want to do? Or so that's one example. And in the area of rare diseases or diseases that are understudied, you know, and that's another area we're labeling, you know, what is a rare disease and what's a disease that's understudied because it doesn't hold glamour or interest for somebody. The PPRNs and PCORNet offer those opportunities to join the numbers of patients that you can access through PCORNet, and then the patient communities that want to push forward those research questions that are vitally important to them and the outcomes that are important to them. Mm-hmm. So PCORNet is really, truly revolutionary. And just like everything else, it's going to be a challenge to build this out and to flip the switch and see how well it works.
Thank you, Jean. So, you know, Wendy, you started out this morning by talking about some of the very interesting things that the NIH is doing around, you know, user-centered design, usability, crowdsourcing. You know, can you sort of share with the audience some of the programs that you have sort of, you know, currently underway, or, you know, sort of in the works in terms of sort of, you know, opportunities that might be available to the broader research community?
Remember, NIH is a very big place.
Yes.
So, and a lot of things are happening organically. I mean, and NIH is proud to support the work of communities. So especially like the area of user-centered design, NIH is working with others. I mean, we're starting to fund research where we're really bringing in the design community in ways we haven't done before. I think as a behavioral researcher who works in technology, I will say that often we look at things like a pill. I build my intervention, I use technology, I build it. If it doesn't work and with significance, then the idea didn't work. But we might build a horribly unengaging intervention, right? We might get it all wrong. So involving the users from the beginning as to what's important to them, how do they want it to look, what features should it have? Just because games are cool, do I need games? We need to think about this scientifically. As well, you know, from the user's perspective, but also scientifically. What's our best practices? What kind of things should we be thinking about? So that's become a real interest, especially in our area of mobile health, which is a big area for us now. We also try to do things like NIH funds the Clinical Translational Science Awards, lovingly known as the CTSAs. They're throughout the country. And they have an engagement core, and where they work with communities, where they're out in the communities working, trying to bring patients and researchers and people, because we're not always patients, we're normally people, together to talk about these things and find out what are the important issues. As Jean mentioned, community-based participatory research, NIH has funded that for years, but it really gets embodied in the Clinical Translation Science Awards. We also have things like Research Match, which we've been running for quite a few years now, that helps people find clinical trials that they're interested in it. So,
excellent, thank you. So we have a couple of seconds. So before we sort of wrap up the panel, again, lots of interesting ideas. And I just wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to sort of make any closing comments that you wanted to make. I take it none?
Well, in the interest of not holding people up for lunch, I mean, I would just say that it is hard. I mean, it is, you are sort of trying to bridge cultures that, or, at least regulatory frameworks that aren't designed to play well with each other. And so it is difficult to do it. It does get easier. I mean, that would, the 5 years from now, or, the 10th ONC summit, what we're talking about now that's really hard will become really easy. And so I think that's sometimes something that people lose sight of, but I think we are making, tremendous progress in this space.
I like to think about how we stay attached to the urgency in this particular field. I think we easily get bogged down in a lot of the logistics and manipulations and machinations, but how do we stay aware of the people who suffer? Because that's why we do this, that's why we're all here. So how do we keep that urgency present and use it in a way that really drives us well?
Yeah, so healthcare is not user-friendly. I mean, just talk to anyone who just had a close encounter with the healthcare system, and they usually are extremely frustrated and upset. So, I mean, we can't escape this right now. So I think we're really, I don't want to use the word revolution, but we're really on a very good track. And I hope that we can all work this out, all the different communities. And when I say communities, I don't mean like cities, but all the communities of participants can work this out because, boy, I mean, I think we have only to go up. I mean...
I want to echo Jean's idea of a revolution here, because I do think we have a revolution pending, and we're working toward it. But bringing these communities together, I mean, data is not knowledge, just as data. And we really do need to work together to translate what we know and what we're learning for everyone. And that's not just when we think about people. It's for clinicians. It's for systems level. It's for everything. And I think there's a whole science base that I get excited about that I think is in there and trying. So,
as a patient, I'm excited about the ability to access and control my own data to improve my own health and wellness. As a researcher, I'm ecstatic about the potential for all of those patients to build on the work that Sharon's been driving, that PCORNet is creating, and enable those patients to aggregate and share their own diverse data easily and on their own terms to support research.
Excellent. So thank you very much for all your insights. And so I know we stand between, the session and lunch, so thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
And before people start heading out, I just wanted to personally thank all of our speakers from this panel and all from this whole morning. If folks can just give them all a round of applause. So this has been a great morning. We've gotten some personal stories. We've talked about access to data. We've talked about providing tools and support for underserved. We've talked about the value of patients, supporting research efforts and patient-centered outcomes research. More to come this afternoon.